Good morning, everyone. So I think this kind of backs off this one actually tags off the back of the work hour one a little bit, being AI is sort of seen as a solution to reducing work hours. I would probably, not part of this research, but from what I've seen with AI, it's probably going the reverse way. It's creating more work, but that's a separate discussion. So just a little bit of context about where this sort of research is stemmed from. So robo-debt, we're all aware of that, the big disaster that the national government had. It's sort of held up as how not to implement algorithms, how not to implement automatic decision-making. It's not technically AI, but it is very much considered like in the realm of AI and algorithm, the algorithm area and where AI is going. What we have seen is there's been some other sort of incidences around the world that hold up to the robo-debt type standard that are very much in the realm of AI. There's one in the States where they were making parole decisions using AI, and based on the fact that most of the incarcerated are blacks, that a lot of the information coming through and the data was being all used on blacks. So they found that blacks were being deemed as more likely to reoffend, and therefore they weren't being released. The big thing on this was the data that they used, they weren't making available to the parolees to see how that decision was made. And that's where the problem came, is that the organisations didn't want to say how that worked because it was a trade secret. It's now sitting in a Supreme Court as to whether that data should be released or not. There's a similar thing in the UK with fast tracking of visas. Again, it came around the people who were going through faster were predominantly coming from Western countries, were predominantly white, and that just it wasn't assessing individuals on individual merit. It was grouping people together. And again, this is sort of this ended up in the Parliament House as a national inquiry, made the frontline newspapers, much like our own robo-debt. And then there's also a more recent one in Holland, where they were very similar to robo-debt. They were looking for fraud, people who are likely to have committed fraud, in particularly childcare. So they were sending mothers these €100,000 bills saying, we think you've committed fraud, without actually finding that they had committed fraud, just that they were likely to have committed fraud. And it's the same as the robo-debt. Both of them have been pretty much deemed illegal, that by letting the machine make the decision, they reverse the onus of proof from the government saying, you haven't paid, here's our proof. So here's our proof to you haven't paid, prove to us you have paid, that's why both of those have ended up illegal. So you can see where AI can go in the hands of the government, can go horribly wrong. I find it really interesting that AI itself comes from the government. So first, Alan Turing's the Enigma machine, breaking out the Enigma machine was the first start of AI. So it is a government property, so to speak. They've just done poorly at it. So what we've seen across the world at the moment, both from scholars and from the WHO, UNESCO, United Nations, they're all asking for how do we develop better AI, and particularly in the public sector. What I'm finding really interesting is there's a couple of points around that AI is an opportunity for us to actually re-envision how citizens interact with the government. So we know that governments aren't overly transparent. AI is something that can be not overly transparent, but if we try to build the transparency in at the beginning, then maybe citizens can actually get a better idea of how governments are making their decisions by making it more available. So we sort of, from that, we've come up with 3 questions. So that we're trying to answer to how is trust engendered from a public sector and AI. And that was what are the perceived risks and benefits? There is a lot of information over that, but we do need to see that to be able to answer the next 2 questions. So what are the trust challenges? And then what are the practices and processes that sort of deal with those trust challenges? My part of the research project is part of a much broader research project, which I've been on since mid last year. So the latter half of last year, first half of this research was going out and getting industry contacts, just testing out the surveys, testing out the interview questions. What's really nice about this project for me is there's people from the social science school, predominantly from the business school, but everybody's got a different area of expertise. So there's trust, governance, IT solutions, and the policy area and social sciences. So it brings together, and you'll see when I get to the analysis, it's actually brought a really interesting perspective on how to go through qual work for me, because it's been able to highlight my own biases quite quickly, which I've found quite interesting. So just a little bit on trust. So trust is sort of the willingness of someone to undergo an element of risk, I guess. And by doing that, you're letting someone or something, being an organization, do something for which you have no control over. What's interesting in AI, and I'll talk about some of the case studies we've got, is that often there's a lot of people out there who are not users but affected by the outcomes, don't know they're even putting their trust in this machine. And it's actually probably a limitation of the study, is you can't go and ask people what they don't know. And so they're having outcomes affected on them. So like the visa application one, for example, but you wouldn't know if your visa was fast-tracked or not, let alone know if your visa was fast-tracked because of an AI system or not. It's just happening in the background. People assume there's people running it. So this is where it's interesting. It's not just the AI, it's the service you're looking at, because the service is who set it up. So we've tried to look at, the way we've looked at it is with sort of some sitting organizational trust models. The seminal one is the Mayer-Davis-Schumann model, and they use trustworthiness as 3 factors of ability, benevolence, integrity. What they didn't consider in theirs was they mainly look at risk. They don't look at the benefits of actually engaging or being with a service. And I think I sort of try to raise it. Something that comes up a lot more, particularly with technology, is not just the risk, but why do I want to engage in it? What am I going to get back from it? The next one is Six and Sorge, looked at like that trustworthiness is actually signaling back to you what's going on. And then McKnight recently they've pretty much taken the Mayer-Davis-Schumann model and turned it into functionality, helpfulness, and reliability in terms of technology. So is this technology doing what I'm asking to do? What's the function of it? Is it actually doing that? And how well is it doing it for me? Helpfulness, is it helping me in my job? Or is it actually creating more work? And there is an element that some technology ends up creating more work. And that would be my argument around a lot of AI solutions, not necessarily more work, but the ability to ask people to do more work. And then is it reliable? So why trust? I'll jump through this one briefly, but why look at trust in AI technology? I think there's a lot of benefits within the workplace. It's also just getting better performance out of your team, and particularly, I mean, the last one's probably the adoption of the technology, and it's not so much the end users and the citizens, but it's also the people implementing that system. Are they going to trust it to use it? So we had one guy, which didn't bring the quote, and sort of pointed out, like, if it doesn't do what we want it to do, I'll just go and do it manually. And then, so you've invested a lot of money into a system and they're still going to do it the old hand way. So trust challenges, that's sort of the things that obstruct the ability for trust to be engendered. So things that are going to make it hard for you to see that. And then practices and processes we've viewed as the things that the organization does that actually help you go, hang on, you can deal with these trust challenges, so I'm prepared to be vulnerable and take a risk in you guys. What we've noticed is that in this area of AI technology and public sector, there is a bit of a missing gap between, there is links to say, hey, practices and processes are linked with trust, but we don't know why. And that's just the research that's gone on. There's not enough of it at the moment. We looked at the case study sort of grew from, so in the bigger, broader project, we've got about 10 case studies going. I scooped out what was going to start off as 3, and it sort of grew into 5 just to keep the numbers up. So we've got one that's a citizen safety program. So it's actually an AI program. The AI is embedded in the camera and it looks at what's going on, and it can be used for a lot of things, which is really interesting, but they don't, because they've got ethical concerns about it. The other one is an asset management tool. So they have cameras go along and look at their assets and then try to give them information back where to fix. Driver enforcement, that one is just the cameras in the sky that is picking up people from mobile phone use and now seatbelts. Harm prevention is a one that's underway but not really publicly known, and that's around a certain area of trying to prevent individuals from being harmed, and they're using information in the social system to pull back to see who is likely to do that. It's quite interesting. It's an interesting one because it's got a lot of social implications of trying to pick people out before they do the crime. And an education aid, which is, it's a tool for students to use. They put the information in and they get given the best results back, best questions suited to them. And so it's sort of trying to tailor the education towards their needs. So we've used a multi-case study benefits. So it's good. It's more generalizable. It's really nice to be able to contrast the findings between each case study within it. And it allows a little bit more movement in the findings because you're finding several things around, and you can try and understand a little bit better why things, or discard things a lot quicker than you probably otherwise would on a single case study. So we did, semi-structured interviews. We covered a range of stakeholders. Interestingly, previous City Member of Parliament, we got to interview quite high up in a state government. And the users has probably been, the weak point of this, because it's really hard to actually find people and get direct comment on the service, on the case study we're looking at, if they don't know it's being implemented on them. So that is just a limitation in the study altogether. Done the thematic analysis of this. This has been a really interesting process in itself for me, going through thematic analysis and qual analysis. It's been a whole learning experience, something we don't really get in 6 years. We went for a Miles and Hooverman rather than the typical psychs, like the Braun and Clark method. This one allows a little bit more recycling rather than a through idea of the 6 steps. This one's a little bit more recyclative. So you can go back and redo things. Instead, I think it was in stage 3, we've actually had to go and read the literature to find out what we're finding. So it turns it from an inductive to a sort of deductive process. And it sort of allows you that ability to go and step out and keep changing it around and refining it a bit more than I think the Braun and Clark does. And then the end is just understanding including, so which is similar to most. I'll go through this. So these are typical findings across all AI literature. So risks of flawed decision-making, just basically things going wrong, what's going to happen to the data, and what's going to happen to the people. Not a lot of stuff came up around job losses. There's actually more around how we're going to reskill people, how we're going to find people with the right skills to, particularly when the service is changing so much. How do you find people that have got the ability to use AI? The benefits were pretty good. It's just generally improved decision-making, better organizational outcomes. And there's a lot of statements sort of implied around the greater good. We're doing this for the greater good, which I thought was really interesting. This is going to just be, this part's a little bit messy, but I don't know how to present it any other way. So we've taken it, or I've taken a sort of understanding of trying to grab the trust challenges and the practices and processes. And this is where I don't know, this is where I know that I'm not sure if my learning at the time has influenced my findings, because they did start to pair off a little bit, and it sort of follows a lot of the trust models that already exist, and a lot of what we found was a lot of it, the 2 big ones were around sort of the accuracy and the ability of the machine or the AI to function as it says it does. How well does it do it? Is it explainable? And again, the guy who said he doesn't want to engage in it. And then the other one around the other trust challenge was around the data and the security. What are you doing with my data? There's lots of concerns, and this was even recognised outside my scope, but in other interviews I've done. There's recognition that the data, once collected, is going to be used for other purposes, even if it's been collected for a stated purpose. And this is in university research where they've collected data for AI technology. They're like, it's going to be sold at some point. People are almost like accepting the fact that their data is going to be leaked and reused again, which is really, really interesting in itself. And they're more like, a lot of their concerns were, how is that data going to be used in the future? There's concerns around some of the data that's being put into other systems around genomic stuff, that once insurance companies get hold of this, it's really dangerous because it will start to put a prediction on your outcomes and basically how much they can charge you for insurance. So I won't go too much into the bottom ones because haven't fully got around that. But a lot of the things that got over the concerns around the technology itself were the principles that were actually built in at the design level, which included how the data was acquired, the vision and values and function. That was really interesting. What are we doing here? What is the purpose? What is its function? When that was built in, that seemed to be really good. And was it human-centric? Data management was just how's it being stored and how's our privacy being dealt with. And there's most of the organisations concerning privacy are well on top of this because there's existing privacy laws and governments have to run by those laws and are audited quite regularly. I've gone into it again. So there's a few of it. I guess I'm trying to find one of the good ones. Yeah, I think what I found some of the interesting ones around accuracy was humans tend to be holding technology up to a higher standard than they would humans. They're pretty much accepting technology to be 99.99% of the time right, but a human 80% of the time. And I find that really, really interesting, and it's like a typical technological problem at the moment. And this is just around data. I guess there's a few more just ethical concerns and how they would store the data. I'm wary of time. I don't actually... Oh, I've got... Okay. So yeah, I guess this is sort of just early understanding. And I think it's pretty basic that the trust challenges are basically guiding the perceptions of risks and benefits. So am I going to be more at risk? Should I go and engage with that? And am I going to get the benefit? And this seems to be something more particular with technology than interpersonal trust, that what am I going to get out of it? And can that technology guarantee that I'm going to get that out of it? So again, going back to the guy who's going to turn away from the technology if it's not giving him what he wants, that's the benefit is him being able to do the job quicker. There's no risk in him not getting that. And I guess the practices and processes are really offsetting those trust challenges to the people. That's their being able to alter their perception. And they're definitely falling into the Seeger's point of view of helpfulness, functionality, and reliability, really falling into that technological understanding. Interesting findings. We had a little bit of a Hawthorne effect. We went to one of the interviews I went to one of the interviews and they said, interestingly, just before the interview, we've actually gone and reviewed our processes and practices and this is what we do now. Based on you coming. I was like, oh, okay, cool. That was quite interesting. So there was a second one down here as well. There's another guy didn't even know, even though he'd signed up to the interview, it was only 2 hours before and purely by coincidence, he actually learned that he was in governance. He actually even learned that they were using AI within that organisation. So I don't know what we were going to sit down and talk about at that point. Would have been a really good, interesting interview. And he said he spent the next 2 hours trying to find out as much as he could. So again, a bit of a Hawthorne effect. And interestingly, some of the agencies were actually saying the privacy laws are restricting their ability to do effective services, so particularly interagencies. So you can't go and get another agency's data without breaking security laws. Quite often, it's very hard. And that data would be if you a driver's license, I'm just assuming driver's license and social services can't talk to each other. So if you've got all this information about someone but you don't know where they live, how do you go and tell them there's a problem, I guess? And then all that. So there's a bit of a problem there, which is really, I think, yeah, it's just nobody knows how to overcome it yet because they're the laws that are in place and they're stating they're around privacy and higher. So beyond the research, this is just sort of something I've picked up being in working in this. I'm also, my workplace at the moment, I sit on a working committee around implementing new technologies. So this is what I'm finding, this is really relevant to me at the moment. But AI is a bit of a frontier industry. I think we talked about safety a little bit before. And I feel that for me, this is just my personal perspective, but the AI industry is being guided by engineers and tech people. And AI is very much a social problem. And safety, I sort of weigh this off with safety. So safety is all about preventing injuries. And that's what we're trying to do in the safety industry. And we're seeing 20 years too late, but we're seeing sites really starting to get into, they've missed the safety boom of the 90s, but now they're getting into safety and they're making great inroads. And we're seeing people on workplaces that are sites. AI is not about prevention. It causes the harm. When it goes wrong, as I pointed out at the beginning, it's actually causing the harm. And we're getting people in there that are concerned about processes and outcomes, robo-debt, and we don't have anybody that's got any consideration for the people. I'm quite I like the human factors area. There's complete disregard for how people even use these things. And they talk about processes, but they don't talk about how the person interacts with them and how that's going to affect the broader business. So I've seen a lot of the articles out there are coming from the tech side. They're coming from the business sort of areas. They're not coming from org sites, which I find really, really interesting. There's a lot of opportunity for business collaboration with this because businesses are moving towards AI technology. I think I read somewhere recently that most of the top 500 have already got AI technology and looking at implementing more of it. So it's and they don't know what to do with it as well. There's a lot of barriers to getting it implemented properly. So yes, it's human factors definitely being overlooked in this area. And then personally, from beyond the research, I've really enjoyed working with this more diverse, like a really diverse team across the schools and getting this very different perspective of, hey, what about this from a human side? And they're like, nah, what about this from a process side? And so it's bringing the two together has been really good for the broader research group and just personally learning qualitative. Wow, yeah, it's been a journey, a real big one. So I think I've just scraped in. Cool. That's it. Thank you.